Hello, 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 and welcome once again to Take Your Pick. I'm your host. Oh, hello. Let's put me on the screen. I'm your host, Chris Piuma. Hi there, and I am coming to you live from my fortress of solitude. But now, thanks to the internet, you can never truly be alone. I've gathered a gaggle of super friends to take their pick from a century of comic book superheroes. Now, Wikipedia defines a superhero as, quote, a stock character that possesses abilities beyond those of ordinary people, who typically uses their powers to help the world become a better place, or is dedicated to protecting the public and stopping evil. That definition sounds pretty okay to me, but I have a mysterious dark secret. I don't really read superhero comics. I read comic strips and indie comics that look like comic strips. But I don't know my Marvels from my AC/DCs, so I'm hoping this panel of true believers can tell me what I'm missing and maybe add a little nuance to that Wikipedia definition. Well, we'll see. Our panelists will take turns picking a comic book superhero and then telling us why they picked that superhero. It's that easy. But once somebody picks one, nobody else gets to pick it. And by the end of the show, they'll each have their own little Justice League to go out and fight injustice with, or just dress up in fabulous capes together. It's all good. Uh-oh. We've lost someone. Oh, no, Matt lost audio. Okay, well, all right. We'll truck on. I think he'll be back in a second. But... okay, in the order, but who, I tell you, will be assembling these crime-fighting teams in their randomly determined order that they will be picking. We have, from the movie podcast Fiasco Family Movie Night, it's Sean Frost.
I'm completely impervious, but only when I hold still.
We've got the author of the graphic novel Alabaster Shadows and creator of Floating Hand Studios web cartoons, it's Matt Gardner.
Hello, my favorite superheroes are the ones that just talk.
My Dinner with Andre, man. And we've got from Tolkien podcast By the Bywater and somebody working on a comic book adaptation of King Lear, it's Jared Pikacek.
Oh, you caught me mid-transformation.
And finally, we've got longtime comics journalist and critic and singer for the band Power Trash, it's Pierce Lydon.
Oh, hey, how's everybody doing? I don't have a joke, so.
That's cool. Jokes are for the weak. And so Sarah Chamberlain from A Part of Our Scaritage was supposed to be joining us, but alas, the commissioner lit up Sarah the Scara symbol, and she had to rush off to fight some crimes. So, alas, she's not here with us. And I don't know nothing about comics, so I won't be taking part this time. But if you're watching this live, I bet you have some feelings about superheroes. And if you comment during the live stream, we will incorporate some of your comments into the show like this. Yep, please do that. Literally, that is why we do this show live. In many ways, it would be much easier if we did this pre-taped. But we want to have your comments. Okay, everybody, now. A calm has come over the city. An innocent family walks home along a dark, abandoned street. A criminal jumps out to rob them, and also to destroy the very matter holding the universe together. Sean, who do you send in to save them?
Well, this is a petty crime. Then I think we have to do the absolute maximum penalty. I'm bringing Stardust the Super Wizard by Fletcher Hanks. Stardust does not mess around. Stardust does not equivocate with crime. Stardust will just murder the crap out of you in the most arcane and bizarre way imaginable, because Stardust's powers are boundless. He can do anything he wants. As soon as the need arises, boom, he does it. Our villains making everybody float off of the earth somehow. Stardust doesn't want anything to do with that. He just puts everybody back where they are. And let's just say you don't want to be caught doing that around him. This is one of my prized possessions. This is Stardust the Super Wizard winding up a mafioso's head to throw to a dimension full of headless bodies so they can fight over putting him on the net. Yeah. It should not surprise anybody.
That's That's like some later Oz book kind of logic.
Fletcher Hanks, alas, did not last very long in the comics industry, and he went off into obscurity and then was found late in life dead on a park bench. No one really knows his story, but there were things in his mind, and he got some of them onto paper that you can buy in a couple of really nice collections.
That is a fantastic way to start. I knew I recognized the art style, but Fletcher Hanks, I'd forgotten his name. I've seen a bit of his work in some anthologies, and it's terrific and batshit.
That costume is.
Is that something that anybody else in the panel is familiar with?
No.
I also, what's his girlfriend's name again? It's like Phantasma or something like that. She's got a skull for a face. It's great.
Yeah, Phantoma, I think.
Oh,
yeah,
Phantoma. There it is.
Yeah, it's the queen of the jungle. Yeah, who also has whatever powers she needs at the moment.
That is a wild beginning to today's show. All right, Matt, I'm afraid you have to follow that up. What have you got for us?
Oh man, I've got nothing that could follow that up. But so we'll go kind of complete opposite into relative simplicity. I love She-Hulk. Just about every iteration of her. One of my favorite aspects about her, though, is that she's incredibly smart, but really lazy, never wants to put the work in. Despite that, she's a lawyer. She wants to punch her way through problems most of the time and gets kind of perturbed when she doesn't have to, but it is her job. That kind of incongruity is my favorite aspect of the character. The best runs of She-Hulk are also the comedy runs. They've done, like, her original run is kind of a straightforward Hulk thing. They most recently did the Savage Sea Hulk again, and, like, they're okay, but she's really at her best when she's just kind of funny. One of the longest runs of hers was very fourth wall breaking. She's kind of a proto Deadpool in the like 80s run. In the early aughts, there was a run by Dan Slott, which is where I absolutely fell in love with the character, where she is her alter identity. Jennifer Walters is hired by a law agency that specializes in superpowered court cases. But she is hired not as She-Hulk, but as Jennifer, and she doesn't like being Jennifer. And it was a really funny setup. One of the storylines involves Doctor Strange as a subject matter expert trying to argue that a dead person should be able to testify at their murder trial. And the whole thing ends up being a twist that the person is lying. The ghost that is summoned to as a witness is lying on the stand. And so, of course, Reed Richards makes a special prison that can hold a ghost so that they can go to jail. And it's just the sheer, like, taking the what would the law be in the Marvel Universe to just ridiculous extremes, and I love it.
All right. And you killed her, you monster.
Dan Slott run, you say?
Yeah, I'm blanking on the name, but there was another run that focused on the lawyer aspect. It wasn't nearly as long. It was tragically short. But it
Charles
was...
Soule one, right?
Yes.
Yeah.
He's a professional lawyer.
Yep.
And so the law is actually pretty accurate in that one, as opposed to the Slott run where it's TV law. The Dan Slott one is rather long, and it's like this complete story, so I highly recommend it. The other one, unfortunately, it only went like 13 issues, so it feels incomplete, but it's still wonderful. And you get Hellcat as her personal assistant in the office, and that's great.
Excellent.
She-Hulk, a character marked with great art too. The John Byrne run has great art in the 80s, and then
that was kind of the self-aware arc.
Yeah, and then
she do a lot
Paul
of like winking at the camera.
Oh yeah, and then Paul Pelletier for the Dan Slott run, and Javier Pulido for the Charles Soule run. I mean, talk about an underrated character.
Yeah. Oh, I loved her in Fractions FF.
Oh yeah. Also, isn't one of the bits in Dan Slott's run that actual comic books, since they are historical documents in the Marvel Universe, can be used as evidence?
Yes.
Or as alibis, right?
Yes, because the canon is Marvel Comics is like a documentary. Like it is
I love
like
comics so much.
documentary tellings of what's happened, so they could use that. And there's a whole arc at the climax because Dan Slott had it was broken into like 2 runs, and the climax of the first run is her arch enemy gets the Infinity Stone of Power. And so everybody at the law firm is digging through the books to try to find a retcon excuse of like how this stone can have a weakness. And they're out of issues, so they go to the comic book store, and there's a bunch of people complaining. Or it's like, no, all this stuff's contradictory. It's like, no, we could use that.
I'm also intrigued by something you said about, and let me know if I understood this right, that she doesn't like being her non-Hulk form.
Yes.
Is that a common trope amongst various Hulks or various other superheroes?
No, it's usually the other way around. Most of the Hulk, like the traditional, and the thing is, it really goes back and forth. What is the most iconic version of the Hulk isn't really necessarily the most common because they go through so many different iterations. But the one that all the adaptations do is Bruce Banner is trying not to be the Hulk.
Right.
And it's frequently played as, especially in adaptations rather than the comics, it's played as kind of a horror where, he is this bottled up thing that you do not want to come out. That's not always the case. And the most recent Avengers movie kind of gets into some of the more recent takes where they kind of found a symbiosis. But one of the shticks of Jennifer is that she doesn't feel like Hulk, being in the Hulk form, she doesn't lose any of her agency in most iterations. And she feels more confident. She feels stronger. And so she likes being Hulk. She goes out to clubs and parties. She's kind of one of her personality traits is she's the party girl. If she weren't the Hulk, she'd probably be hungover every morning. And
I wouldn't change back.
Yeah, it's like that's one of the most relatable things. It's like if you could do that and there weren't any downsides, would you turn back? No. It's like, oh, you're green, tough. I'm like 9 feet tall. What are you going to do about it?
Exactly. This horror of being a normie is absolutely fantastic. I'm totally into that. But I think we need to move on and find out what superhero Jared is bringing to the table.
I think my first pick is going to be Hellboy, actually, from the eponymous comics. He is a demon child summoned by Nazis, then raised by a professor in America, so he turns out is a good guy, sort of. Oh God, I don't. Half the time he's not even a superhero. He's just a guy who's punching monsters or just getting drunk. Well, okay, no, he is a superhero then. I really enjoy him because he's a curmudgeon, but he likes pancakes. There's this fantastic short comic where when he first tries pancakes, it's like a 12-year-old. Hell is shaken to its foundations because he enjoys them. I just like him because he's got all this sort of evil potential bottled up inside him. He's considered a freak by a lot of people. And he has to sort of constantly make the choice to be a better person than he was born to be. And oh God, what else? I just love him so much. What else is there to say about him? Really, he's a big brawler character, and I don't normally like those, but I like him. So
one of the things I find most relatable about Hellboy
yeah.
is the fact that he is perpetually like kind of just tired.
He's perpetually tired. He constantly has to stand down those horns so that they don't take over and make him a demon prince or something.
Does that hurt him?
No, because they're just bone.
Okay. Well, okay. Yes.
Supernatural bone. I don't know.
It's like trimming your fingernails or something. I get it.
Yeah.
He's great because he's like thoroughly supernatural in being, but he's just this guy, and he doesn't have time or patience for all of the supernatural crap.
Yeah, he doesn't want to deal with the Lovecraftian horrors emerging, but he's gotta, so he's just goes and like.
It's also great too, just because Mignola and his various collaborators really do insert a lot of like they make humor so important. We've seen Nazis be the villains of a million different comic books. The industry's back is built on that basically, but the fact that like I always, I mean, I guess it was a meme for a little while, but like the monkey has a gun.
The monkeys have a gun.
Like it's so silly, but it also is like, oh no, this is perfect storytelling, and like it's sometimes you just need to laugh at the sheer audacity of the situation, and Hellboy's an all-timer.
Yeah, he's an everyman, even though he doesn't look like one. His reactions to everything are very much like, I'm just a tired guy who would rather be drinking a beer on a couch. Like even talking to like a giant octopus witch or something under the sea. He's like, can I go home?
I think just looking, again, I haven't read Hellboy. Shame on me,
good.
I'm sure. But just looking at the images that came up when I was looking for that image with the rum bottle, the deeply, this is a whole rabbit hole we could go down, and I'm fine if we do. The deeply saturated red of his color, and the printing technology that was around by the time he was being published, being quite different from earlier comics, right? You can have that saturated color palette. It's just the whole palette of it is really striking. I think.
The coloring,
the color choices are fantastic.
Yeah, he's always bright red, no matter the environment. There may be one or two exceptions, but he's almost always that really saturated red, which really underscores that he's not part of this dimension, really. So no matter what the color is around him, he's always going to be removed from it, except for some like scenes in hell, I think, where he matches his surroundings.
Also, it's important to note that my husband is making fun of me here.
And cats. He also likes cats.
Oh, very good. All right, Hellboy, fantastic choice. Pierce, it is your turn. What is the first superhero that you're going to bring to the table?
All right. Well, the first one I'm going to bring to the table is Marvel's 90s attempt at doing a new Spider-Man. You know him. You love him. It's Darkhawk. Darkhawk was a character that only I like, I'm pretty sure. To the point where I had the first issue signed by Danny Fingeroth, who was the editor on that book and wrote that most of that run, his run in the 90s. And I put it in front of him and he said, "Why do you want this signed?" And then he signed it with a pen, like a normal pen, not like a Sharpie, so it almost ripped the book. But so I grew up in New York City. I grew up in Queens, and so Spider-Man is basically he's our hometown hero. However, there was another one, especially when I was growing up. I'm 31 now, so one of the first books that I remember getting, my dad picking up a bunch of comics at the store, was Darkhawk, and Darkhawk's another kid from Queens who stumbles upon a magical seeming amulet that allows him to switch places with this superhero character suddenly. And through it, he kind of like has to deal with his sort of like anger issues and the fact that like he's a very 90s teen, like let's put it that way. He's very angsty and he hates going to school and stuff. So he's in a lot of ways kind of an anti-Peter Parker, but he's got to like, when his when we find out that his dad is like a crooked cop, and now, Chris, the guy who is Darkhawk, he's got to like step up to protect his family against kind of all of just Spider-Man's villains. He did not really have many of his own that were not. If he had his own villains, it was like Evil Hawk, Overhawk, and they're really just palette swap versions of him, kind of.
Even darker Hawk.
Yeah, basically. He fought Venom a lot because why wouldn't you just put Venom on the cover?
Venom in the 90s.
Yeah, exactly. But he was a character that I was always like, yeah, everybody likes Spider-Man, but I like this sort of slightly darker take, slightly more like angsty indie kind of take on the New York hero. Darkhawk. That's my guy. Yep, there he is. He's got one claw because claws are cool, right? Wolverine. He essentially has an Iron Man suit. He can fly. And then we find out later on that he's actually switching bodies with an alien entity. And then in the 2000s, it gets, we find out that the suit is part of something called the Fraternity of Raptors, which is the worst name. The worst name for, I guess they're not like a superhero group. They're more like an evil alien, like space force. Like they're like evil Green Lanterns, and he has to fight a guy who is literally a palette swap version of him named Talon. Why they're bird themed? It doesn't really.
There's Spider-Hawk.
Gotta be
Raptors,
something.
the most villainous of birds.
Yeah, but yeah, the Fraternity of Raptors.
It seems like anytime he shows up now, it's always as part of an ensemble, and then he will become the antagonist, not intentionally, but just because his anger gets he gets overtaken by his anger powers or something.
Yeah, I mean, the most like notable, aside from being in Nova during Annihilation in like the late 2000s, I would say his most notable appearance is like The Loners, which is just a book about former superheroes going to therapy.
Yeah. Was that
cool.
the group? Was that the Phil Orrick group that started in Runaways? Or is that a different one? That's a different thing.
That's a different one.
Because there was a group of like former D-listers that Phil Urich, as the former Green Goblin, the Green Goblin that nobody remembers, the good one, makes a support group for former superheroes, and he was in it.
I definitely like Delta Alpha Call. Again, this is stuff I only know very second or third hand, but my sense is that there were, Michael said the 90s energy is so strong, that there were quite a lot of very angsty 90s trying to get the teens into comics kind of, from people inserted into all your major genres, all your major threads, all your major IPs, whatever the word I'm looking for is. I wonder if we're going to see more of those. All right.
Wasn't he in the book where Arcade kidnaps all the angsty teen heroes and basically puts them in Battle Royale?
Yes, Avengers Arena.
Yeah, that was actually a pretty fun run.
And he dies, kind of. He almost dies because Chase from Runaways gets his amulet, and then Chase has his gauntlet and the amulet. By the way, the amulet is not just like on a thing around his neck. No, it's embedded into his chest. So he's got that ripped out of him. I don't. Oh. It's fine. One last thing is that issue, I think 3 or 5 of that book, he fights Portal, who's just a green version of him, who's an old Avengers villain, in the Museum of Natural History. And I used to work at the Museum of Natural History. So in a weird way, a thing that I really liked when I was like 5 years old ended up being the place that I ended up working for until recently, about a decade.
Was there a big splash page of, I forget the name of the dino in the entrance hall?
There was not, but
Sue?
They did. No, that's at the Chicago.
Oh, that's in Chicago.
But there was Mike Manley who did the art, like perfectly referenced the museum. So all of the panels, all the backgrounds are like, I was like, oh, this is my job. Like, this is where I go to work every day. So it was really cool.
Yeah. Especially also because last time I was there, they haven't updated much in the last several decades.
They're working on it.
Yeah. Well, as somebody named Chris who grew up in Queens, I am super happy with that choice. Let's go around to round 2, where the points are doubled. Sean, your first round, you gave us the brain splattering Stardust, the super wizard. What on earth are you going to choose next?
So that was someone I found out about maybe, 8 years ago. So this time I'm going to the Wayback Machine for me personally, one of the first characters that I loved in superhero comics. And she's been mentioned tangentially here, but not as a main choice. I'm going to say Patsy Walker, Hellcat. Yes, Hellcat I was introduced to her as one of the lamest, a member of the lamest lineup of the Defenders, which I loved because it was like, so you got a gymnast in a yellow suit, a rich guy with a jetpack, and a Russian woman who kind of sometimes is there and sometimes isn't. So when you get in over your head, you have to call Doctor Strange to mind whammy the Hulk into helping you. Okay, I'm here. I'm here for this. This is my team. These are my people. I really at the time I adored the fact that she didn't. I mean, I found out later she actually did have powers, kind of, at the time. But to me, reading it, I was like, she's just a gymnast battling these things that are like mystical forces and explosions everywhere. And wow, that image is the very first appearance of Patsy Walker as Hellcat. And that happened in the Avengers. She was helping the Avengers find evidence against her own husband. They were looking around in a warehouse, skulking around in a warehouse, and she finds the costume lying on a crate. Decides right then and there, I'm a superhero. This is why I love Patsy Walker. She's also one of the oldest characters in the Marvel stable, having been created, I believe, in the Atlas days as star of her own teen comedy comic. Sort of like, think of like an Archie style thing.
She was Marvel's direct competition to Archie.
Yeah.
And this is back when Marvel was primarily a romance comic book company.
I'm looking at the Wikipedia page here. She first appeared in Miss America Magazine #2 in November 1944.
She's got a long history.
Yeah. If not the oldest, one of the oldest.
It was this like she was kind of a romantic klutz lead of her comic, and she had her paramours, and
that's continuity. That's like we talked about earlier with comics are continuity in comics. Yes, those are comics that her mom had made to make her a celebrity and get rich off her. And this comes up. It came up in the
Jessica Jones.
Netflix TV shows, Defenders and Jessica Jones, where she's updated to Trish Walker. I kept waiting. I was like, come on, make her Hellcat finally. And they came close, but didn't quite do it. The suit she found actually gave her more agility and strength and stuff like that. She later gets supernatural powers when her husband, the son of Satan, kills her. And then she's brought back from the dead. She's had a very successful reintroduction recently. She's become pretty popular again, which I love to see. She's a great character, always very chipper and a lot of fun, and that can-do attitude despite being completely outclassed.
The weirdest retcon is the fact that her husband, who is a supporting character in her romance comic, then gets retconned into this like evil magic supervillain out of nowhere.
Doesn't Moondragon teach her psychic powers also? Or am I missing?
Right.
Honestly, that Defenders run is kind of amazing. I've been reading through it because there's a great podcast, if you don't listen to it, called Tighten Up the Defense. They do Teen Titans and Defenders deep dives. And
I love both those things.
Yeah, it is. It's wonderful. But yeah, Patsy Walker forever.
Fantastic choice. All right. Now, Matt, you gave us She-Hulk before. What will be your second choice?
I tend to be a bit of a Marvel zombie with superhero comics, so I'm going to do at least one that's not that. And it's going to be the very first comic book I ever got was Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles. And like almost everybody in my generation, I was introduced to them through the 90s cartoon or 80s cartoon. I never really got into the Mirage comic, which is the original, which was it's weird to go back to it because it is a direct parody of Frank Miller's Daredevil run, to the point that they have the same origin. The panel is drawn that if you are carefully looking at this and compare it to old issues of Daredevil, the gag is that the truck that hit Daredevil and spilled chemicals on him that gave him his powers, that canister then rolled further and landed in the sewer, and that's what made the Ninja Turtles. And it's the original is like grim dark to the point of parody, which is kind of the gag. But then, of course, the 80s cartoon happened and they got a lot lighter. And I got into them through the Archie comics, which were super light, but also super convoluted. And like what threw me is the first issue I got was a direct adaptation of one of the episodes of the cartoon. A few issues later, the storylines branch and it goes into its own thing and it gets crazy. But what I love most about Ninja Turtles is because they have had so many different permutations, and every one is just a little bit different. Because in the original, the mutagen just makes animals humanoid. So Splinter is a pet of Hamato Yoshi. In the cartoon, they make it merges you with whatever you last touch. So Hamato Yoshi is Splinter, and then and they've had all sorts of iterations. The movie kind of goes back to the original, but with like the characterization of the cartoon. But there's been an IDW comic since then. There's been reboots of the Mirage comic. There was an Image comic. And what I love is that they're so a part of the pop culture, they're just a staple of pop culture. Everybody knows the basics. But you could take those basics and remix them a little bit and do something that's recognizable but still very different. The IDW comic still had, it made them like reincarnations of Splinter and his four sons of Hamato Yoshi and his four sons who lived like 100 years ago or something like that. There was there's the cartoon, the 3D cartoon, which tweaked it a little further, and it really gave them like, that's the first one where they all start looking a little bit different. And then there's the newest cartoon for them where they are entirely different species of turtles. And also the new cartoon, the animation is completely bonkers. If you like the old 90s OVA animes where it was just about what crazy crap can we get away with the animation because Japan's in an economy bubble and they have more money than they know what to do with, the new cartoon looks like that. It's just the action is bonkers. But what's always true about them is that they always still have this family dynamic. And I love that. And I'm a big fan of reinterpreting things. I was big into mythology growing up, and you get the same story told different ways so many times in that. And Ninja Turtles just feels like a modern mythology in that regard.
That is a very fun choice, but I'm going to have to lay down my hammer. My
Do I have to pick one of them?
You have to pick one of them. Which one shall it be?
Until I was 10, it was Michelangelo. Ever since then, it's been Donatello.
And I would love to hear why. Because
Michelangelo is the happy-go-lucky one, like in almost every permutation. And so I kind of gravitated to that towards a kid because I was kind of a sad kid. And it's but Donatello is kind of he's the one the other ones always pick on. Like the family dynamic, Donatello always feels like kind of like he's the brainy one. He's not as social as the others in most iterations. He likes having time to himself to work on whatever. It's not that he's antisocial. He doesn't want to be around them. He just wants to work on something and the others don't really appreciate whatever he's working on. So that always connected to me.
He's the Lisa Simpson?
Absolutely, he's the Lisa of the group.
All right. Excellent.
Yeah, and he's the nerd, and I like nerds. Like I am a nerd, and that's my people.
Absolutely. Fantastic then. That's a great choice. Michael saying yes. The shock of encountering the comics after you know the cartoon. I keep meaning to actually read the original comics run.
I actually read a couple of them but back in the day because just before the Archie comic and the cartoon hit, I was, when specialty comic stores were just popping up, I had gotten like a comic collector guide or buyer guide or something. And I was reading about all kinds of things because I'd just gotten into like ElfQuest and stuff like that. And there was an article in there on Eastman and Laird's Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles. And I was like, what the hell is this? So I picked up an issue and I read it and I was like, what the hell is this?
The original one is mostly just crazy in a like, what can we get away with because we're our own publisher, so they could do whatever the hell they wanted.
and also just like for it. We really dig Frank Miller's Daredevil so much that we'll just do the same thing, but with turtles. Honestly, I think that the first issue of Ninja Turtles, the Eastman and Laird Ninja Turtles, I think that first issue is basically perfect. Like that, it goes. And like, especially if you know what they're referencing, you're just like, wait, this is so much fun.
Well, and once you realize that the grimdark aspect of it is so over the top because that's the joke. Yeah. Like it suddenly, like I originally thought it was supposed to be serious. I'm like, this is so dumb. Yeah. And then when I just realized how, like, you kind of understand completely how over the top it is. It just gets to be, just nuts.
Did you ever see the cash-in to ride on the back of the turtles
coming out of our shelves?
Which one?
Adolescent radioactive black belt hamsters.
Sean, you're from Mars. For that.
Sean, you're really gonna love Tighten Up the Defense. There's a whole episode about that book.
Oh wow! Now that I'm looking at the artwork for the cover of that, look one of that. Yeah. It may be too gross for me to put on screen, but you can look it up. Adolescent hamsters will get you to the wiki page.
No, I will second that podcast. That podcast is a blast to listen to.
Fantastic. All right. It's time to move on and find out who else Jared is going to be adding to Hellboy for his Justice League.
I'm going to go with the most powerful superhero in the Marvel Universe, which is, of course, Squirrel Girl.
I saw that coming from a mile away.
She's so much fun. Specifically, the Ryan North, Erica Henderson run, which is really cute and fun. But I really like superheroes that combine the mundane with, like, Batman's fine, but he's like a billionaire. He's not super. His life is not relatable to me. Squirrel Girl going to college and having to also fight Thanos is half relatable to me. I won't say which half, though. like what is it? She's got like the powers of a squirrel. She can talk to squirrels, but her biggest strength is just being delightful to the point where she just like hangs out with Thanos on the moon to like get him to stop destroying the Earth or something. She's so cute. Yeah, this blend of like stubbornness and I hate to say pluck because it just sounds so condescending, but like she's plucky. She's a plucky hero.
She's endlessly cheerful.
She's endlessly cheerful, and she's so ridiculous. The giant squirrel tail on the costume, the big buck teeth, the little ears. I think she's the sort of inherent madness of comics just made exuberant and fun and bouncy, and a little exhausting in a way. I mean, she's a little much at times, which is great. Yeah, she's just so happy. She's weaponized happiness.
Sorry, I'm trying to get the image up here, but I'll let everybody else talk about Squirrel Girl. Why?
Don't show the Ditko one.
Oh no!
Oh
they
God, no, not the
her
Ditko.
Against like the most fearsome villains, and she ends up friends with them.
Yeah,
Yes.
like texting them and stuff.
Yeah, like there's this big arc where they're finally putting her up against Galactus, and then they end up like having snacks. It's
Oh my God, I said Thanos. I meant Galactus. Oh wow, okay.
well, she did beat Thanos too, but that wasn't an arc. That was just
Yeah, no, I was thinking
panel.
I was thinking of Galactus, and I was just like, oh, Thanos. I don't know.
No, they're both purple. It's fine.
Yeah.
There was a run of what was it, Great Lakes Avengers, that kind of brought her back into the forefront before
Thanks,
she
Dan,
got her
a
own
lot.
book. And there was a gag where off panel she would beat all the major like A-list threats off panel. You never really see how she does it. And they check in on her, and she is standing. Thanos is unconscious. The Watcher is there and confirms that is in fact Thanos and not a clone, and not a simulacrum or anything. But yeah, once she gets her series and becomes just the series takes the complete madcap distillation of the most bonkers stuff in comics, like Next Wave did, but strip away all the cynicism of Next Wave, and you've got Squirrel Girl.
That's a good point. Yeah.
Yeah.
As much as I adore Next Wave.
Oh, Next Wave is a favorite, but like Squirrel Girl, there is just this refreshing, complete lack of cynicism about that run. That is just like, it makes you smile.
Also, you know, that
It kind of reminds me of. Sorry, am I talking over you? It kind of reminds me of Steven Universe in a way, where
Absolutely.
she's able to overcome all kinds of. It sounds so trite when you say it, like just by being positive, but like they put the work in, so it's not just like, oh, and then she smiled and everybody was friends. It's not like that. She has to work for it.
Yeah, she earns her wins.
Yeah, but to do that and make it seem and just make it happy and delightful all the way through is not easy, and it's a big accomplishment, I think. But
it's a book that always puts you in a better mood than you were when you started reading it.
Yeah.
Also, I finally like Kraven.
That was my first exposure to Kraven, was when he shows up in Squirrel Girl.
Like, he's fine in Spider-Man, I guess, but what's the point of having him anywhere but that Squirrel Girl book? It's perfect.
Yeah.
Sean, were you going to point something
out? Yeah, the sheer joy it brings me in that image you popped up of seeing the squirrel in the little gloves,
and the little ears on her helmet.
Yeah, I mean, that's chef kiss right there. That's her relationship.
She has a space suit for Tippy Toe.
Yeah, and the fact that she doesn't just talk to squirrels, she has personal relationships with the squirrels, knows each one of them by name. I mean, these are her friends.
and is willing to argue with Galactus about pronouns.
Yeah.
Yes.
Excellent. All right. Whose turn is it now? I believe it is Pierce's turn. You gave us Darkhawk. What is your second choice?
All right. I guess similarly, I was introduced in the 90s, but that's only because of my age, right? I'm going to go with Cyclops because I am X-Men trash. And
Same.
And was there anything bigger than the X-Men in the 90s? I refuse to believe it. But yeah, Cyclops is my favorite X-Man. I'm the oldest of, I have two younger brothers, and Cyclops, and like my middle brother would always, like, we'd play X-Men because the TV show. So we'd go outside, we'd play X-Men, and he'd always pick Wolverine before I could, I guess. I don't know how that happened. So then I'd like have to be Cyclops. But as I got older, I realized, I was like, actually, I love this character, even though he abandoned his wife in Alaska and sent his son just forward through time, I guess, to save him. And overall, like, kind of is a, I guess he's not a great dad, but but what I've always admired about Scott is that I guess similar to characters like Superman, like you get a lot of characters who, because they're good and they do the right thing and they follow the rules, like people want to write them off very quickly, right? And I guess being the oldest in my family, having to be put upon like, oh, like I have to take care of stuff. I have to, listen to my parents and do what they say and be a good example and do all these things. But like sometimes I'm gonna be bad at it. And to me, like that's what Cyclops is like he's trying his best all the time, but his best is really not good enough a lot. And but he's like still gonna try, but he's like so bad at that he ends up killing his own mentor. So I don't know. He's just a character that I've always heavily related to. Yeah, I guess that's it. I mean, and also he's pretty much always had great costumes. The X Factor costume being the best one, but the 90s costume being a close second.
Yeah, no, his costumes slap.
All right.
It's hard to go wrong when you start with the visor.
Right?
Yeah.
He's always one of my favorites. I relate to him more than most X-Men because he is kind of a Boy Scout. He's a real stickler for the rules. And that kind of makes him a boring fuddy-duddy, but like I relate to that.
Yep.
And that's I think he gets a little bit of a bad rap for the whole leaving his wife thing. Like that's horrible. But in the situation, he's like, oh, my friends that I grew up with after they rescued, that I grew up with as a child after I was rescued from the evil orphanage, like literally supervillain evil orphanage, say, oh my God, there's an emergency. You have to come here. And his wife says, no, you can't. If you go, you can never come back. And he's like, well, I'm going to go. Since you told me never to come back, I will respect your wishes. and then she's like, where are you? Why didn't you come back? He's like, you told me not to. Like he's
very
a little
Scott.
overly literal. I've seen readings of him as autistic, and they actually they would explain a lot of his like hyper literalism. There's a great essay by Jay Edidin, who is the host of the Explain the X-Men podcast, analyzing him through that lens and how he kind of came to relate to that character from that, because he's also autistic, and it's just it was a fascinating read. I've seen people not necessarily agree with it, but it's the fact that character exists and is not usually not presented as negative for being such a Boy Scout and a rules person. That's usually portrayed as one of his positive aspects. Is just it's nice.
Well, and I think too that like similar to like Superman or Captain America, characters who like it's actually I guess like Captain America is the one that gets this the most, is that like everybody's like, oh, Captain America, he fights for America, but when America's wrong, he doesn't, and so similarly, Scott's somebody who, when he had to decide he was going to follow a path that was more like Magneto than and sort of more revolutionary, because he decided that was the right thing to do, like the rules changed. And I think that that's something that I've always appreciated about the character, is that like, yeah, he is a stickler for the rules. However, in a lot of cases, he makes the rules, you know, and he's willing to sort of put himself in that situation so that others don't have to.
Yeah, he's very self-sacrificing, sometimes to a fault.
Yeah.
But, he very much is I'm used to suffering, so I will do it.
Big mood.
There was, what was it? There was
Similar
like
to the
psychic supervillain they were up against, whose whole shtick was like getting into people's heads and amplifying their negative emotions. And he tries to put the whammy on Cyclops, and he's like, "No, there's so much angst already in here, I can't handle it."
Oh, we've all had that day this year. All right.
I'll have that day this weekend.
Exactly. We have to move on because it's time for round 3. We'll have one more round. We have just enough time for one more round, I think. So let's figure out how we're going to round out our superhero trooper heroes. And we will start with Sean, who's given us Stardust the Super Wizard and Hellcat. What will be number 3 for you?
Well, I do want to go to DC because I did a Marvel. I got to be equitable. Let's do a DC. And I'm going to choose another one that has sort of returned to consciousness again. And that is Negative Man, Larry Traynor of the Doom Patrol. I love Larry first and foremost because Mummy. So, like, he like many origin stories of the 60s, he was a test pilot. And he got exposed to radiation, and it left him like a radioactive hot zone with a half-life of way too long. He's never going to be not radioactive. So he's in bandages because they're specially treated bandages that contain his radiation so that he doesn't murder everyone just by saying hello. How this covers his eyes and his mouth, they don't explain in the original run. That's handled in the 80s when they actually like tape over his mouth and have treated sunglasses that look way cool, but shield his eyes. But Larry's great because there was a series of books called Wild Cards, and a lot of people have read them. I have not, but I know someone who talks about them a lot. So in that series, like, you could get a really great power. Odds are you're going to die horribly. And some people get like, okay, here's your suck power. And Larry got the suck power. And his suck power is that there's an energy being inside of him that he can kind of suggest things to. And it can leave his body for 60 seconds and no more than 60 seconds to go do things. And meanwhile, he slumps to the ground and can't move. This is the worst power. And he soldiers on. Like, he can't even, like, he winds up often for the original Doom Patrol run being the taxi service for the team because he can have the energy being pick them up and take them across the globe. But he can't go with because he can't have the being pick him up because as soon as it touches him, it goes back inside. Like once somebody thought of, hey, what if I hold you? Then it moves me. But like every single fight, there'd be like, oh, I'll just use my lead dusting gun to coat you in protective lead dust so you can't release your dude. Or like when the spirit escapes him, they'll be like, aha, and seal him in a lead casket. So, every third issue was like, countdown to Larry dying. It's great stuff. Like legit, I could have picked any of the original Doom Patrol because I love them so much. I just finished reading the omnibus of the entire 60s run, and it's a wonder to behold. I came across them like most people my age because of Morrison saving the 80s reboot. And I do mean saving the 80s reboot. I've just started to read the stuff that preceded his run on it. And I am a very sad Sean. but yeah, apart from that little stretch, Doom Patrol has always been wonderful. I've loved the recent stuff. I love the show. Can't wait for the second season. Negative Man, to my delight, is so good in that show. Most of them are, but Negative Man, yeah. Oh, yeah.
Season 2 is great so far.
Is it?
Yeah.
I refuse to have an umpteenth streaming service, so I have to wait.
Fair enough.
I was so glad they took a lot of Morrison-y elements for the first, but made it sane enough to follow.
You might not think that so much about season 2.
I'm expecting it to be Candlemaker.
All right. Well, Negative Man. Very good. I hope they, at some point in the run, made a Negative Land joke, but we'll see.
They mostly call him Neg Man or N Man. They tried a lot of things, but...
Does he neg a lot? Oh, that's not good.
He does not neg. No.
Okay. Matt, your team so far is She-Hulk and Donatello, which is a fantastic pairing. Who's going to be the awkward third on that date?
Oh, man. I am also X-Men trash.
Yeah.
Anybody who's seen my cartoons online knows this. But I would say Jean Grey as the counterpart to Cyclops is a choice. I feel she's another character that I actually really, really relate to. I think she suffers from... There is never a good adaptation take on Jean Grey, except maybe the two most recent movies, and those movies weren't good. So the fact that they had Jean Grey be good in them is like a mixed bag. But in the comics, she is such a fun character. One of the things that connects to me most about her is she is incredibly passionate about maintaining her agency, which is also why the whole Dark Phoenix saga, where like she gets her perception of reality changed and turns evil, is like works as well as it does because she has been kind of built on maintaining her own agency. She doesn't like to be told what to do. She doesn't like it's not that she bristles against authority, but if the authority starts speaking for her, she will bristle against it. And I relate to that so very hard. But I think her negative aspects are some of the most fun, and also what they tend to miss out. Most adaptations they make are just kind of goody two-shoes perfect. But she could be kind of a bitch, but never on purpose. She holds herself to an incredibly high standard, but she holds her peers, she expects her peers to be even better, and gets rather not angry, but frustrated when they don't meet up to her expectations of what she expects for herself. Where that's a fun counterpart is she is incredibly impatient with her peers. She's very patient with her charges. So like her students, younger kids that she's taking care of, she's incredibly patient with. But other adults, not so much. And that's really fun, and I also very much relate to that. And then combined with she can read everybody's thoughts, and sometimes forgets that other people can't. With a lot of her behaviors, like she expects other people to be as empathic as she is, even when she doesn't actively use her powers. She's very good at understanding what motivates people.
So I'm going to apologize because I was looking for a good image, and there are lots out there, but I ended up picking a stupid image that isn't even from a comic.
Here.
I just really got enchanted by this self from an animation.
Her costume from the cartoon was
what is going on with those breast things?
I question about a lot of comics, to be honest.
I know. Fair enough.
Panel for just a moment, but I'll come back with a link to a good one, but my image will disappear when I do this. Just a second.
Yeah, one of my favorite corrections in comics was when Jean Grey was found after the Phoenix Saga, because
the beginning.
All right, let me get this image up while you keep talking.
Like the creation of X Factor itself was really one of my favorite things in X-Men history. Especially Peter David's run on it had so much hilarity in it that just
the first run of X Factor when Jean is in it, the first 5 issues are really painful, but after it is just like telenovela level high drama soap.
Yes.
And if you're into that, it's a great run.
That's my favorite X Factor, actually, which nobody says.
I love it.
The Simonson stuff is so good.
That book is why I almost had Tabitha Smith as one of my choices. Boom Boom.
Oh, okay.
When she appears at that late in the run.
Yep.
Oh, I freaking loved her.
Almost one of my picks too.
I have to say, yellow is a hard color to pull off for a lot of people.
Yeah, and that's possibly one of my least favorite costumes of hers. It's from Jim Lee's redesigns of the X-Men. I hate this costume, and I love it because, like, thinking about what this comprises is insane. First, you've got a full body unitard with pockets, so it's like a cargo unitard. And then you've got this like one-piece tiny swimsuit over top of it, giant metal epaulets, greaves, what look like cord organizers on her arm for some reason, and then she's got a head sock with, as Pete put it in the chat, the iconic home base symbol on her forehead. This costume is nonsense. I love it, but it's nonsense.
It's very 90s.
Okay, yeah.
All right. Fantastic. Okay. Well, it is time for Jared, who has given us Hellboy and Squirrel Girl. Who will be the third to join them?
Oh, God. Who will be? My list is too long. I have too many options. I don't know. I guess I'll just say Superman. Why not go big right now? We all know Superman. I like him because I really like lawful good heroes who don't compromise. I don't want to say, kind of. Might be the right word. I don't know. My coffee is not kicked in, obviously, this morning. Sorry about that. I think my favorite version of Superman actually is in this little trade paperback featuring Shazam as well, where he finds out that Shazam is really just a kid, and his reaction is not to be like, "Oh, cool, welcome to the team" or whatever. It's to say, "Who did this to you? Who forced these powers on you?" With the implication, I guess, that he's going to go mess him up. And I love that idea of a hero who's just immediately invested in protecting the vulnerable, not so much about like what am I trying to say?
That one legitimately makes me cry every time.
It is so good. I actually have it right here just for inspiration. Yeah, he's really mad at Shazam because Shazam just wrecked some stuff, and he's not going to be like, he's not continuing his anger with this character. He's instantly switches to like, okay, an injustice has been done here to a child. I'm going to rectify it. And he's not, his virtue is, I want to say, not complicated in a way. The vision of what that means changes throughout the years, I think, depending on who's writing him and all that. But he's just a good guy, and he's always trying to be a good guy. And I always find that very interesting, especially when he comes up against these really complicated, ridiculous comic situations, and he's just like, what is the best thing I can do right now? And tries to do it.
It's interesting because, again, as somebody who doesn't know, but like one of the common reads I've heard of Superman is that because he's so purely good, that he's boring that way. And it's interesting that you are focusing on, or you're framing it in terms of how he's involved in difficult moral calculations to try to figure out how to even be boringly good, right?
It's not even, I mean, it's comics. They're not always that difficult. Usually it's pretty,
Sure.
it's pretty obviously a right and a wrong. But like, I haven't seen the Zack Snyder movies because of everything I've heard about them, where he takes ways out that are violent or fatal when Superman typically tries to avoid that. Which I like. I mean, it's not like, I don't know. Again, coffee hasn't kicked in. I'm just like,
To me, the best Superman comics are the ones where it emphasizes that despite all of the negative things that he sees in the course of being, the premier superhero, he still has a completely undying faith in the goodness of humanity.
yeah.
And that is where he becomes this really hopeful character, especially when his arch villain from, his number one villain from the 80s on, and it's been a villain throughout his whole run, but like the main one ever since the 80s, Lex Luthor, is basically an epitome of everything that could go wrong with humanity, where he's perfectly human, but he's awful. And even despite being faced with this, he still trusts that most people can be better. And that is, especially in times where it's hard to have faith in humanity, a good Superman story can help restore that a bit.
Yeah, for me, like, Superman was a character that when I was, when I was first really collecting, probably in like my late teens, I was like, don't get it. Why do people like this guy? Whatever. He's got every power. Where are the stakes? Who cares? And that wasn't in like a Batman way either. It wasn't like, yeah, Batman. But I was like, all right, I get Batman. He's just a guy. He's, he's rich, but he's just a guy. Superman, whatever. Who cares? He's got freeze breath. But the thing that kind of shifted my focus on the character was exactly what you're talking about. It's like that belief in humanity and how powerful that is, and how that's something that we need in our everyday lives. I mean, current events being what they are, like what I love is also, Golden Age Superman, realizing that the way to get the government to help like a low income neighborhood and to have like FEMA come in is to destroy everything. Like, it's not a perfect solution. It's a very comic book solution. But like the fact that he's like, oh, if I destroy everything, well, they'll come in and they'll build new houses that are going to be better. So it's like, yeah, he's good, but he's creative. But my favorite moment, probably my favorite Superman moment of all time, comes from All-Star Superman. And it's, he's off flying to somewhere. And as he's flying around, he notices this like goth person standing at the edge of a building, about to jump, and he flies over and stops them and gives them a hug and says, your therapist really was stuck in traffic today. And that's it. And I'm getting like choked up even just thinking about it. It's a scene I've like read a million times. And And it's just like, right, real life can get in the way, but that doesn't mean that like nobody cares about us. No, Superman cares.
Yeah. I think of course he can be written as a boring character, but every character can be written as boring. I think a lot of the criticism of him being boring is that we tend to mistake cynicism and darkness for depth. They can be deep. They can also just be the easy way out. So, yeah, he's not inherently boring because he's found with empathy and all that. So
the end of that All-Star Superman arc, which if I have to recommend a single Superman comic, that's usually the one I do. But the end of it is such a great like thesis version of the Lex Luthor Superman conflict, where Lex Luthor goes on his big rant, basically saying the MO of Lex Luthor, the modern take, is he believes Superman is holding humanity back because they've got this guy to fall onto, and he's like, look at all the great things we could do if we didn't have you. And Superman's retort is, I'm not stopping you. And like it just basically instantly makes Lex Luthor seem incredibly selfish, and just bounces backwards. It's like, you could still do that, but you chose not to. And like I love that run so much. That run also makes me cry.
Yeah.
When he gets the ability to time travel, and he's like, I'm going to go see my dad before he died. And it's just like, oh god.
All right. Excellent. Well, we have one more pick to go. Pierce, you gave us Darkhawk and Cyclops. Who is going to wrap up your team and wrap up our listing part of the show?
All right. So my last pick is Beta Ray Bill.
Oh, yeah.
Beta Ray Bill, for those who don't know, obviously is from Walt Simonson's legendary Thor run. He's an alien who gets the powers of Thor. And he's just I think he's one of the coolest looking characters of all time. But also, the fact that he's introduced in that run, not as a villain, but as an antagonist at first, because Thor doesn't understand what he is. But then he can pick up the hammer. In a lot of ways, what I love about him is it's kind of similar to like the Into the Spider-Verse thing, like anybody can wear the mask. In a way, Walt Simonson kind of got to do like, well, it's not only Thor that can be Thor, like other people can be worthy, like it is possible. But I love him so much as a character because he, especially his, the brotherhood that he shares with Thor, because they have these like the similar power set now, but that he is always striving for more. His relationship with Sif, and that he's sort of the consummate outsider, right? He's this alien. He looks kind of like a demon. He's this like horse-faced monster. And yet he's one of the best and most, one of the most noble characters in the entire Marvel universe. And he's like the guy you want having your back, And what I love about him too is just, if Beta Ray Bill shows up, like things are going down. I mean, he was on a team with Silver Surfer called the Annihilators. I mean, enough said.
Wow.
Oh, this is great. I've never heard of this character before, but I love that look.
That Simonson run was the joy of my teenage years. So good.
That is if you just want the joy of comics in kind of a superhero wrapping, that's the run that I would point to people. It's just fun and like just in every aspect. But Beta Ray Bill is one of the best things to come out of that. He's one of the best things to come out of a phenomenal run. It just shows how good he is.
I gotta say, it was between him and Throg. So
we have a few comments from that came in just as we wrapped up the Superman, or right when we started because of lag. But basically, I think they can be best summed up by Michael's comment. And yes, the best of Superman is the idea of a man who's effectively a god, still cares about us as individuals.
Yeah.
Which is an interesting read on that. We are in a moment going to start listing off other thoughts other people, other superheroes that were on everybody's mind, the Bring Out Your Dead round, so to speak. We're going to go over them quickly. But before we do that, I was all ready with a sort of a thought that I'd had, and then Jared ruined it. My thought was none of the big names had appeared. And I wanted to inquire about that. I mean, there's a certain amount of, it's still true, we did get Superman at the end, but a lot of the biggest names, even amongst the X-Men, didn't show up, I suppose. And there's a certain amount of wanting to talk about lesser known characters that you love, both for cred points, but also because you want to spread the good word, and that's totally fair. But is there something else at work? I'm curious to know. Is there something where since that maybe your big Batmans and Spider-Mans are feeling a bit, and your Wonders Woman are feeling a bit tired? Or that it's just that you're more excited by the things that other people may not know about as much. I mean, I guess several of these, Donatello is certainly well known.
Largely as like I've always kind of experienced life feeling like a bit of an outsider, and so as a result, I've never connected with the big ones. Like as a big X-Men fan, I never connected with Wolverine. I didn't connect with Wolverine until very recently when they put him in a explicit teacher role, and then all of a sudden, and also I was the right age for it too because I was in my 30s when that happened. It was like, oh, I get it. But like Wolverine as the loner with a mysterious past, just I don't care. And yeah, Superman, I didn't really connect to most of the time, and then there's of course the stories we were talking about, but I didn't come across those until much, much later. So he wasn't formative for me growing up. Batman was incredibly formative for me growing up because of the 90s cartoon, which is still just one of the best pieces of superhero media ever produced. But I also think he's kind of a given, and this kind of a thing is a chance to introduce people to characters or takes on characters that they might not be as familiar with. Everybody knows Batman, so I just like it didn't even consider putting him in there because everybody knows him.
I did almost go with the most indie thing. Well, not the most indie thing possible, but I almost went, instead of Superman, with Superhero Girl, who is a Canadian superhero who's just like a slice of life comic. She's got a lot of the same powers and stuff as Superman, but she's fighting like ninjas in like some Eastern Canadian city. Like you do. The reason I went with Superman is that it would have ended up being me just recounting the entire plot of the comic to explain what her deal is. I didn't want to take all that time.
My as I said at the top of the show, because I'm somebody who reads comic strips and indie comics that look like comic strips, my sense of Superman is pretty filtered through Chris Ware and the Superman that appears in Jimmy Corrigan, who's just this sort of sad, cruel person who's just awful to everyone and works in mysterious ways. I don't know. It's pretty great. But it's super good to hear about that. Let's do the Bring Out Your Dead. If anybody is still watching, and I know some of you are because Mikey keeps making fun of me.
I regret not having the stream open too.
That's all right. Tell us, we'll go around one more time and everybody can talk about who they haven't picked. And if you're watching this, please put in the comments somebody that you wish we had talked about. And we will talk about them a little bit at the end. So once again, Sean, you gave us Stardust the Super Wizard, Hellcat, and Negative Man. What else? Who else was on your mind lately?
I was also considering Space Hawk from Basil Wolverton. It's another 40s era Nazi punching character, which gotta love. Completely slipped my mind, but I could have put Captain Canuck as another Nazi puncher. And get some CanCon in.
We got Superman. It's cool.
But Basil Wolverton is perhaps better known for doing some crazy work on Plop. He did covers on Plop and some other weirdnesses for one-off things with Mad Magazine. I originally was thinking of Rita Farr, Elastigirl from Doom Patrol. Mary Marvel, Captain Marvel Jr. Not so much Captain Marvel, but I did have the legacy of Captain Marvel, Ms. Marvel, Captain Marvel, Captain Marvel, and Ms. Marvel. The Creeper, which is probably my second favorite Ditko creation. Spider-Man being the first, but not listed. Ambush Bug, which is my favorite fourth wall breaking character. Supergirl. The Heap, which is another older comic that is sort of credited as the basis for things like Swamp Thing and Man Thing and that whole muck monster pantheon. Also a Nazi puncher. Wonder Woman was my big character, iconic character, also a Nazi puncher. And the Moon Knight, but really only the first run. I never got down with the whole now imbued by powers from gods aspect. I liked him when he was like third-rate Batman with like
Batman
leftover.
who might actually be crazy.
Yeah.
All right. Excellent. I had to look a few of those up, but that's what I'm here for. I'm here to learn. Matt, you gave us She-Hulk, Donatello, and the rest of the Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles, and Jean Grey. Who else was on your mind?
Well, we've brought up Spider-Man. He was on my list for much of the same reasons as the others. He's the consummate deals with normal problems superhero, where, you know, despite everything, rents also do. And, you know, and he's got, if you read the first like 50 issues, it's one of the most solid character arcs in, I would say, of like Silver Age comics, is him going from this very angry kid who thinks like, well, I got these powers, I deserve them, I deserve everything, to the Peter Parker that we know now. It's just a wonderful arc. Jimmy Olsen. He's just fun. He's just like, he's friends with all the superheroes, and it's just,
And
his stuff is madcap fun. What's that?
He's had more powers than anybody.
Oh God, yeah, yeah. Because you could just do like, you could throw darts at random things in your apartment and come up with a Jimmy Olsen plot that's already been done.
Yeah, he's probably good to it.
I even mentioned this: Tabitha Smith, Boom Boom, Meltdown, Time Bomb, Dr. Madam Explode. She's had a billion code names.
Okay.
Oh yes. I love her. She's snarky. Her first introduction in comics is she goes to the X-Men because she finds that she got powers and got kicked out by her family. There is the typical superheroes misunderstanding fight, and she's like, nope, I don't want any part of this, and leaves. And it takes years for her to show up again in comics. But she gets introduced in X Factor and gets developed into another just fantastically complex character. And Hawkeye, but specifically Kate Bishop, the second Hawkeye. I love her. She's just introduced as someone who happens to be there during a superhero fight, but she just comes into her own as this she's just so fun. She's got this kind of modern millennial weariness of the world, yet, you know, just weary attitude towards everything in the world that just gives her such a fun perspective. And once they started making her like more and more of a protagonist, it's great. But yeah, those are mine. And nod to, she's not a superhero. I'm sure she's been in one issue, but one of my favorite comic characters of all time, Betty Cooper from Archie. She's not, I'm sure she was a superhero once, but
undoubtedly.
Yeah.
All right.
She's pretty. She can fix a car. I love her.
Let's be sprightly so that we can get this done before in the next 5 minutes. Jared, you gave us Hellboy, Squirrel Girl, and Superman. Who else was on your list?
Superhero Girl, which I already mentioned. Vision, Scarlet Witch, Green Lantern, because I fucking love magical jewelry. Stupendous Man from Calvin and Hobbes.
Oh yes.
Hawkeye.
Oh.
I love. Yeah. Anyway, Hawkeye, but normal Hawkeye, and possibly controversially, Nightwing's butt, which has been carrying the DC universe since its introduction.
Fantastic. And Pierce, you gave us Darkhawk, Cyclops, and Beta Ray Bill. Who else were you thinking about?
All right, I had Magic from New Mutants, Nomad, Girl Without a World, Ricky Barnes, Animal Man. I had Dick Grayson, but I guess the rest of him.
The normie choice.
Yeah. Guy Gardner, but only as a Red Lantern. Longshot and Star-Lord, but specifically the Abnett and Lanning run, not the current version and not the previous version. That's very specific, but the characters
Yeah.
all over the place.
There are three distinct takes on Star-Lord.
Yeah. So those are. Oh, and I had Superman as well, but thankfully we got to talk about him. So.
Yes, good. All right, let's see what our viewers were thinking about. Emma Frost, says Pete.
My aunt. Yeah.
Yes, that was exactly it. And Michael saying 100% on brand brings up Captain Newfoundland.
Yeah.
Now, who here knows who Captain Newfoundland is? Michael, of course, grew up in Newfoundland, which is that island province off to the east of Canada. And Captain Newfoundland, there's a lot to say about him. You can see he's got a map of Canada for a face. He's got there's a whole theory. This is behind this was the creation of Jeff Sterling, who is he ran a really weird TV station and had a media empire kind of in Newfoundland and was deeply eccentric and had a theory or promulgated a theory, if I'm remembering this correctly, that Newfoundland was the only remaining fragment of Atlantis.
Sure.
So that's what's in the background there. And of course, he had a sidekick, Captain Canada. Here's a fun thing I just found out. Captain Canada has a Wikipedia entry, perhaps because people were confusing with Captain Canuck, but Captain Newfoundland doesn't. So it seems like a crime that the sidekick has the entry and and it mentions that it's from Captain Newfoundland. That artwork, by the way, by Boris Vallejo. Anyway, super weird thing. Go check it out if you are at all interested in deeply eccentric corners of comics. Let's see. Yes, it's a map of Newfoundland, and Jeff Sterling is the Newfoundland Howard Hughes. Exactly. Totally worth going and spending a little time doing a bit of a Google dive on that. With that, I would like to thank all of our panelists. Thank you, Sean. Thank you, Jared. Thank you, Matt. And thank you, Pierce. I would like to thank everybody for watching and commenting who is watching it live. And of course, if you're watching it later, that's great too. Thank you for tuning in. I hope you had a fun time. I hope you learned about a few new comics along the way. We will be back next week, taking our picks with a different panel on a different topic. So tune in then. But in the meantime, I'm going to play the theme song and we can dance our way out of here. Thanks a lot.
Bye.
And we can pretend that we're no longer live and talk for a little bit about how that went. But secretly, we are still on, and we know this. This is a new part of the show. But I forgot to warn you about it, so we're going to do it here. But it's about to end anyway, so this has just become completely meta. But I hope everybody had fun. That was really great.
Yeah. Thank you for having me.